I spent last week drawing the model in two different poses, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and this week was all about painting. Hey there, I'm Katerina. I put my corporate career on hold and started an art academy at 30. Every week, I share my artistic journey, the real challenges, breakthroughs, and everything I learned along the way. Welcome to my channel. Even though week 23 has just started, it's only the second time for me facing a long pose like this. So with a lot of time, first to draw and then to paint the model. In one of my past videos, I explained how the structure of the classes changed since September. And if this is your first time watching my videos, I highly suggest you to check my previous videos and subscribe to my channel. It will really help me grow my little community of artists and those who are passionate about art or learning journeys. Until June, our painting classes only lasted 3 hours with the same pose. I know 3 hours might seem a lot if you don't paint, but I promise you, when you paint, they just go away in a blink of an eye. Now, however, the same pose lasts 2 entire weeks, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. And that completely changes the experience of painting, because it gives you the time to study, to slow down, to understand what you're doing, to make mistakes and then correct them, and to really deep dive into your work. Our academy follows a Renaissance approach, and as you might imagine, Renaissance masters surely didn't finish a painting in 3 hours. Their works were built in layers and glazing, carefully developed over time. Having the same pose for multiple days allows us to do kind of the same thing, to paint in depth, to build substance and atmosphere gradually, to make every step meaningful. After spending the last week refining 2 detailed drawings, this week I began by transferring them onto canvas. I didn't just transfer the outlines as you might often see in videos. I actually transfer also some of the chiaroscuro with tratteggio or hatching in English to suggest light and shadow. Of course, I didn't remake the entire drawing, but I wanted to carry as much information as possible for my painting. Once the transfer was ready, I started to apply the first transparent washes, the foundation of the grisaille, the monochrome underpainting. When you paint thinly over the transfer drawing, the hatching remains subtly visible underneath, adding structure to the painting. And the grisaille stage is all about setting values before adding the color variable. My teachers often say that if your grisaille works, half of the work is already done. What I'm struggling with, and this applies to many steps of my process, is creating smooth transitions between the lights and the darks, and softening the edges to make them more atmospheric, more poetic. And in fact, my teachers told me that my grisaille looked like wood. This is something that I definitely struggled with this week. And I think this is also because our school focuses a lot on tratteggio, hatching, and we're not very used with sfumato, and I think that this shows up in my painting and in my drawings as well. With this kind of example and others as well, I'm starting to understand more and more when people say that if you want to paint well, you need to be able to draw really well. Because the principles are the same and painting is a continuation of drawing, just with more variables, color, transparencies, texture. So yeah, this week I spent the first couple of days on my grisaille. On Monday I focused a lot on the darks and on the midtones, while on Tuesday I started adding lights to build the form. Then finally Wednesday arrived and I started with color glazing. Swimming teacher helped me begin this step without fear. Together we mixed the skin tone, and with the confidence of a house painter, he swept a large layer of transparent color on half of the figure. I was shocked. He did that just in one gesture. He didn't worry about covering different values as I normally do. And that's exactly why we need the grisaille underneath, because it already has got all the values inside. All that was left to do was to sculpt on the painting by adding touches of light here and there. And that's when it really clicked for me, because painting is all about sculpting with color. Teachers often say that many times, but I don't think I really understood this until this week. You build volumes, you carve light into the form, you make shapes turn. Teachers repeated this to death, but I think for me it only clicked this week. And it's funny to think how much of all this goes back to the apparently simple exercise of the sphere from my last few weeks. Do you remember that? Do you remember how hard it was for me? But I really think that once you get those concepts, you're gonna be okay with so many more advanced concepts in painting. It turns out that truly understanding that one simple form gives you almost everything you need to understand about shadows and painting and light and how how to turn forms, and so on. Now, when I paint, I'm not just trying to copy what I see in front of me, but I'm trying to think in shapes. I imagine the anatomy underneath, bones, muscles, planes. The scapula, for instance, in the painting I was doing this week, caught the light from the left. That was where the light came from. And as long as the plane changed and the shape turned, the scapula was gradually fading into shadow. And that's when anatomy becomes essential, because when you understand the structure of a muscle, you also understand how it turns, when it changes plane, and your brushwork will follow that motion naturally. That's all that goes through my mind every time I paint a single figure. And that's also why studying geometry and anatomy, it's not only academic, it's the foundation of how we see. And luckily, this week we also had our anatomy class, where we focused on the transition between the ribcage area and the pelvis area and how they are connected. And regarding all these topics, this week while I was painting, I was also thinking about a sort of conflict that I feel in the art world, in the art school system, and so on. On one side, the Renaissance approach, constructing the human figure through knowledge, imagination, and mastery of the form. Artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, they didn't just copy what they saw, but they recreated reality. They elevated it. They used their models as references, not as limits, and built figures that expressed ideal beauty and divine proportion. On the other side, the realism of the 19th century. Painters like Millet, Courbet, Sargent, Sorolla, they wanted truth, not idealization. Their mission was to represent life as it was, with sincerity, light, and emotion. Observation became their religion, and imagination somehow became secondary. Sometimes I feel this tension still exists today, even in how art is taught. There are those who believe that art must be learned through direct observation and really thorough rendering, faithfully reproducing what you see, and those who insist on reproducing from memory and knowledge, building from within. And both sides to me feel incomplete. And what I'm searching is the union of the two, observing with sensitivity and inventing with understanding, in order to be able to create something imagined, but the depth and the truth of reality, something I not always perceived in invented depictions. That's why I admire so much artists like Roberto Ferri, for example, because in his paintings, both imagination and invention coexist, they don't fight each other. And it is that balance that for me is the ultimate form of mastery. But obviously that's my point of view, that's my personal taste, and that's probably the direction where my personal research will go to. And also that's my point of view, my interpretation of the reality and the art world at the moment. What do you think? Do you want to add anything on this? Because I think that there are so many things that we could add and we could discuss about. I'm really curious. It's something that has always interested me since I started this journey. So if you want to leave your point of view in the comments, I would be really glad about that. So yeah, this week while painting the model at the academy, I was thinking about all these things. Because when you focus too much on anatomy, it's very easy to make it feel artificial, very sculptural, very bulky, and it's something that I personally don't like too much. And when that happens in my work, I wonder, should I stick closer to reality and not think too much about anatomy? In my head, it's just all a contradiction. And I'm also sure this is a matter of experience, knowing how to merge observation and also knowledge. So by Wednesday, I had already applied the first color glazing on both the morning pose and the afternoon portrait. Also, I added a bluish background that I must admit I have stolen from the most experienced member of our academy, Jean, who's an amazing artist. Please check her Instagram. And in her academic work, she put this very beautiful background that I thought that could contrast very nicely with skin tones. So I also thought of using it. The cool tone contrasts perfectly with the skin tones and makes the light pop off and the skin look very nice and warm, almost real. And finally, on Thursday, I worked on the second layer and glazing with the morning pose. It's something I'm not satisfied yet with because the figure still looks very artificial. I still need to sculpt it a lot. It still looks very flat. So I am definitely in the ugly phase of that painting, but I need to sleep on it, let it rest for the weekend, and then go back on Monday and adjust it. As for the portrait, I couldn't touch it because it was still wet, and I have been expressly forbidden to touch it by the main teacher. I haven't touched anything, if not just refining some little details, and then I just started sketching a little bit on my sketchbook. To be honest, this is the one I'm most excited for, firstly because, as you probably already know, I'm in love with portraits, so it's a very good practice for me, but I think even though I'm still in the ugly phase with this one too, it's less ugly phase than the other one. Do you think so too? Let me know. I really hope I won't ruin it. Overall, this week felt like a real roller coaster of emotions. You know, painting weeks are always more intense than drawing because it's so much more unpredictable. And it's crazy how with one brush stroke I can feel completely exhilarated, and with the next one I want to throw everything away. But I know, learning to paint means to learn staying patient, especially through the ugly phase, which I'm definitely into with my morning painting. One of my favorite painters, Gustavo Ramos, says something like, painting well is mostly learning to survive the stage where art looks a disaster. And that's exactly how I feel when painting, this week in particular. Like, I'm just trying to survive that middle stage where nothing looks right. If you remember, in week 20, I managed to complete my first academic painting. On the other side though, I completely gave up on the second one. In that one, the ugly phase seemed to me impossible to overcome. The goal for next week is to stay resilient and go on. It's frustrating, but it's also where growth happens. You just have to trust the process and emotionally detach a little. After all, these are academic studies. They're meant to teach, not to be perfect. And yeah, to end the week on Friday, we visited Museo del Novecento here in Milan, and it's an amazing museum about Italian art in the 20th century. From Boccioni to Carrà, to Modigliani, Casorati, Fontana. It's fascinating to see how art evolved through wars, cultural revolution, politics. Our guide told us a lot of things about it, and it was very interesting to learn. And beyond the art, the museum is stunning. The view on Piazza Duomo, the architecture inside, if you ever have the chance to go and visit it. And that's it for this week. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know with a like, with a comment, and by subscribing to my channel. You would really help me to grow my channel and my little community. I really hope to see you in the next video, and I wish you an amazing week. Bye!